podcast with our host, Scott Smith. Scott, how are you? And I know you're excited about our guest today.
Neil, I am great and I'm so excited. We have Sarah Still with Vivid Impact Partners. Sarah, how are you?
I'm great, Scott. It's great to be on with you guys.
All
We're
right, we're
glad.
excited to have her. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, Sarah, let's just dive right in. Can you share your story a little bit? Talk about how you got started in your career and then ended up starting Vivid Impact Partners?
Yeah. So I graduated with my bachelor's in accounting with, let's see, 6 weeks after my son was born. And then I graduated with my master's 2 weeks before my daughter was born. And so while all of my classmates and friends were going off to get their CPA and work for big accounting firms, I knew that I couldn't do 60 to 80-hour weeks, or wasn't going to, was choosing not to. And so I started working with a small agency as their bookkeeper, accountant, and about 8 months in, started working, focusing on operations. I realized, okay, their books were a mess, got those cleaned up. Now realizing there's no structure, no systems, no consistency really in packages and services and everything that was being offered. And that's fine when it's two guys just, doing their own thing. But they had added a couple project managers, and it was stressful to say the least for them. And so I just did what I do and problem solve and build and start creating the things that were needed to put some structure in place. And we started scaling and took off from there. So over the 11 years I was with them, we grew to about 70 people. We got to about 8 million. We were pacing 10, and then some changes were made internally as far as ownership decisions. And so I then decided, well, I'll take what I've done supporting this agency and start working with other agency owners to help build their businesses.
And what's really important about that, Sarah, is that they need somebody that's already done it before, especially when they're going to try to scale a business. It's not the easiest thing in the world. You can be a solopreneur, but once you have to scale to this certain level, you need somebody like yourself to kind of really understand and explain how it can be, I guess, scalable and what people to hire and how do you market it and how you do all the different things to continue to keep the doors open. Because once people scale, that could be the end for them and they can't scale anymore, or they have to make changes. And if
Right.
is it really, and then working with someone like you, is it really a scalable business? Because sometimes it's not.
I think any business can be, but you might have to compromise or sacrifice some of the things that you really want to be doing as the founder. And I think that's the biggest bottleneck that creeps up is the founder themselves. And if they are still acting as a solopreneur, then it can be really difficult to get off the ground beyond a certain level because they're too in the weeds, they're too ingrained in the service delivery and not focused on the things that they need to do to really grow.
It's interesting that you bring up that bottleneck, right? Because that was actually my next question. And it's funny that, founders we can get in our own way, right, of our own scaling and growth. So considering that, let's just talk about that again for a little bit. So that being a common bottleneck, how do you address that? How do you resolve that issue?
Well, I think a lot of business growth is logic, and a lot of it comes down to just clarity and understanding what's needed to grow and scale. But so much of it is actually emotional and psychological. And so being able to understand what's really driving the owner, the founder, and how do we find fulfillment and meaning as we're stepping out of the day-to-day activities that we're used to and where we were finding value or where we felt like we were valuable, then how do we continue to add value in a way that's now different and continue to find that fulfillment and meaning? So a lot of times, organizations get stuck because their founder is the only one driving sales. So how do we shift that so that the message and the connection is still getting across and we're able to drive interest when but not dependent on this one person and their network, or maybe they're involved in service delivery. And so a lot of that comes down to, do we have the things built into the foundation of our business that allow the founder to trust the team to hand that off so they don't feel the need to micromanage or oversee or be the one cleaning up the fires and in the weeds. A lot
And
of
then,
it comes down to that foundation.
absolutely. And then how far can they scale with cash? Are they charging enough for their services?
Yeah.
Is this possible in this marketplace, especially when we're seeing the changes in AI, where staffing to 70 people really is not going to be the case, where we're seeing
Oh,
so much changing? And are you in too much of a competition? Do you need to niche down more to
yeah.
make your services where you're not having 20 people that do the same service? And I'm sure you're seeing that, Sarah. This is
Yes.
really happening, and it's happened in the last 6 months where, okay, everyone's scaling and they're going to offer everything, which then makes it really difficult to differentiate yourself. So then you niche where lots of people aren't niching again, and you have to find the marketplace for it. And that goes back to, can you get viable leads? Do you have the ideal customers? And that is what the process. So what you did and how maybe I did in scaling a year ago has completely changed because of AI.
Yes and no. I think so. I agree with not getting to 70 people. And now I will say those were not all full-time. They were not all US based. But it was the number of team members that we had functioning as part of the team. And there's value in finding, just like niching down on your client base, niching down on your team and understanding what skill sets you really need. So many things come to mind based on what you just said. One thing I want to call out though is it's so easy when it's hard to fill your pipeline and to close to think, I need to add all these services. I need to open up my market. But really what I've seen happen is if the founder or the leadership does not have a passion for those additional services that you're adding, you're not going to have the same thought leadership. So you're not going to have the same value on those services. So now where you might have been a world-class, for us, it was e-commerce marketing, Google and YouTube, core services. Okay, let's think about adding Facebook. Everybody says, I want an agency that does all the platforms. I just want one team. And I understand that from a client perspective, but what you lose is that world-class
I
level of best
agree.
practices and strategy and understanding of the platforms, because you still have an owner or a CEO who is driving, they're passionate about one platform and this is just a moneymaker. It's not going to perform at the same level. You're not going to have the same investment on the marketing and sales side. You're not going to have the same investment on the team development side. And so really now that's just there to prop up an agency rather than really drilling in. And it comes down to a scarcity mindset. Like,
Right, but
okay,
that's what's
we're
happening is the
burning.
scarcity. So let's talk about why we're doing all these multiple services, because of the economy, because we are in a
Mhm.
recession. They're not telling us we're truly in the recession, and people, and I'm going to go back and piggyback to you, Scott, are not really recognizing that. So they're deciding to go away from their core values. I mean, I'm listening to this on Neil Patel's podcast all the time. He's talking about buying up all these agencies to add more and more services. It's because this is where the market is right now. The market in 2025 could be much different. We don't know, but and so many other people have come into the marketplace because of AI, which then means you really, as you're right, need to niche down and show you're the expert and no one else can do what you do. And why the value of what you do, because there's so much in the weeds now. But
And you do have
that,
to be flexible. You do have to pivot and understand this is where the market's going. And so maybe what we were doing and the way we were doing it isn't going to be as successful going forward
mm,
as it was. So we still have to flex and pivot. But I think a lot
mm.
of that comes back to the marketing and sales side, because there are still many successful companies out there.
Oh,
And
they
so
totally are.
the
No,
more you niche down and the more you target very specifically exactly who you want to work with, it goes against that common sense of the scarcity
But it
mindset,
has to be
because
patience too, Sarah.
it's a
That's
smaller
the
net,
problem.
smaller
People have
hole.
to be patient and grow slowly if they're going to go that route. But the
Right.
success is going to be far, far more. Look at
But then
Jeff
you're
Bezos and
investing
Amazon.
in,
Mhm.
yeah, you're investing in higher value as an agency. So then you can charge more. So then you need fewer clients. So it all ties together. It has to do with your SOPs. It has to do with the quality of your team and how much you're investing in growth on that side. It has to do with the leadership that's involved in how how innovative are we able to be in developing our thought leadership and best practices? I know like right now, a huge thing is personal brand awareness and capitalizing on the skill set and knowledge of the internal team members so that it becomes, your net becomes so much wider if
100%. If
every
you're hiring the
specialist
right
or
people,
director,
hire
yeah,
the right people and keep it longer. All
if
right,
they're
Scott,
putting that
because
message
that's why
out.
we need Scott, because Scott is the outsourcing guru to help scaling. Scott, go to your next question.
Yeah, I'm the scaling guy, right?
Yeah.
But we're talking about Sarah. So Sarah, with everything, and Neil, you really referenced this, things are kind of in a state of flux,
No, I don't know. And that's
right?
where the fact is I have decided to pivot towards podcasting in my agency and it be less of an agency, a little bit more flowing, a little bit more involving the founder, just because I am seeing the marketplace right now. I'm seeing where we're at and the difficulty of selling specific services that, yes, you can deliver on, but it might not bring the result that's going to keep the client longer term. So I'm seeing these changes in the market firsthand as an agency owner. And I am shifting to more of niche because I'm seeing this almost COVID style again. I did this before. And it's kind of a weird situation that we go through, Scott, because then we say, okay, boom, we were seeing a little bit of a big push after COVID for a while, meaning COVID, final COVID, not first COVID. And then now we're seeing a shift back to almost days of COVID. And that's where your specialization has to come back in.
So,
I
all
don't.
right, so Sarah, so let's talk about that just a little bit. So how do you approach strategic and financial planning for businesses in circumstances like this, especially when they're looking to grow?
Yeah, so probably because of my accounting background, maybe just because I'm also a nerd at heart, I love spreadsheets. I want to see the data. I want to understand what is actually happening. So to me, the numbers tell the story, and looking at the history and looking at where we at now, we have to understand the current landscape of the agency and the available bandwidth so we know where we need to pivot, where we need to invest. Identifying the targets, mapping out the projections, all of that is helpful in giving us the data we need to make the decisions. But we also have to understand that both money and time are finite. So as we grow, we're going to get capped on both of those pillars. So the evaluation also has to determine what hard costs are going to increase or change, or can we pivot away from? How can we be flexible with our hard tangible costs? But then also, what do we need to be investing in terms of our tools and our role development so that our team is leveling up? And then how can we trust them? How can we partner with our team and with our clients so that we know that we are focused in those specific areas that are going to add the most value, and we're not spending energy and time on things that are essentially busy work and feel like they make sense to do, but may not actually be moving either the agency forward or the client's work forward.
And that's why you need someone like that, Scott. This is the thing I see. And you got to talk to the founder if they're really open to this or they've tried it and then they shift and they pivot. I don't like, here's the thing. You build a big agency and you're the founder, you're going to work a lot of hours at first to do it. Do you want to work that many hours, or do you want to be more of a solopreneur? This is what I've dealt with as an entrepreneur for 15 years, is back and forth from owning a tutoring business to then starting a full-fledged marketing agency, then to niching down, then to go back another agency level again and saying to myself, what do I really want to do? And why do I want to do it? Because we can create what we want to create.
Yes.
And
but so many times we're not that intentional. And so then it becomes something that isn't what we wanted.
right.
And
And
to me,
it's
the
too,
whole
that's
benefit of being an owner is you get to decide, you get to choose.
right.
So if it's not what
Exactly.
you
I
want
can choose
to
when I want to do, when I want to do it. And if I want to go to work or not. And I have
Right.
the luxury, my agency's 32 plus clients, that, okay, I can just go ahead and make a shift and be fine. But
Yeah.
again, the problem is a lot of agencies are doing the race to the bottom. Scott, I'm going to go back to you. Then I have another question for Sarah. See, this is a perfect podcast just because she's speaking my language. I could go and have a podcast with her any day to talk about all this stuff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, do you want to work 100 hours a week, your brain's going crazy, or you want to niche down and get and find the right clients and then scale that way? And then we're dealing with the coaching industry. Scott, there's so many different things. And I think the competition is fierce. And I think the blue ocean strategy, Sarah, is probably a big move people need to make in 2025. Yet they got to be patient.
Yeah.
No, we all want to become millionaires and billionaires in 2 days. Well, guess what? It doesn't work that way. Because
it's going to take me 3 days, I think.
No, it's going to take you very quick time, Scott. That's why I look forward to discussing with you. The thing that happens is when we are sales driven, that is the hardest part if you're not a salesperson. And that is the ultimate thing. It's a numbers game. If you have a great product or service that I call the cure for cancer, bottom line is you are almost an idiot if you can't sell it. So that's where you have to really go and work on your delivery, your elevator pitch, understanding who you're going to speak in front of, and that changes the game. Or you're bullheaded like me and have to make 60,000 mistakes to finally figure it out. But good, Scott.
All right. So Sarah, Vivid Impact Partners, you offer fractional COO services, right? So all the things we've talked about, how do you come in as a fractional COO and bring the benefits in that model that companies really need, especially if they're not really ready for a full-time executive hire?
Yeah. So it's been interesting stepping out of an agency where I was very much in it day to day, all day, every day, focused, inside of the organization, to now, how do I support organizations from the outside? Like, yes, you're part of the team, you're integrated, but you're still a third party partner.
Right.
And what I've really learned is that the term fractional COO is so vague and so broad, and everyone has their own definition of what that even looks like and what that means, that just by saying that's what I do or that's what I am doesn't necessarily mean I'm in the right fit for everyone who thinks that they want a fractional COO. So it really comes down to, what does this partnership look like? How do we have clarity? How do we set clear expectations, just like any role that you would have on your team? And with the way that I'm modeling it, I've also learned, being an external partner who has not been ingrained from the beginning or long term, there's a lot going on in the organization that I'm not going to know immediately or quickly. And so for me to come in and assume things, or to try and copy paste my experience from before to this agency, is not going to be effective or sustainable. If it's a 90-day sprint, if it's a year-long engagement, 2 years long engagement, if I leave and it goes away, then that's not the impact I want to leave. I want to make sure that I'm setting that organization up for long-term success, whether I'm continuing to work with them or not. So it comes down really to, in the beginning, establishing clarity and what are our values? What's driving our decision making?
100%.
And where does the owner want to go? Where are they wanting to take this? And then making sure that every objective and initiative that we set in place is driving towards that. Mm-hmm. And so then my relationship with the agency and with the owner is primarily, I won't say primarily, first thought partner, because to me, that is the first role that a COO plays with a CEO, with a founder, is I'm here to brainstorm and to think through this and to assess risk and to call out things that maybe you don't see, because I am more in tune with the day-to-day. And so I'm your thought partner. Let's talk and think through this. Let's feel confident in the actions and decisions that we're going to make. We're not getting paralyzed. We have clarity. And then it's an execution partner. Okay, now we're going to make sure we get that done. So whether that's from an accountability standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, from a support standpoint, from a, hey, I've done this before, so while we can't copy paste, here are some things that I've tried and didn't work, or here's some things that did work. How can we best customize this to work for your organization? And then supporting the team as they implement and integrate the initiatives that are defined as those priorities to reach the goals.
Well, somehow if my friend Damon, Cowboy 347, ends up with funding for a podcast agency we're looking to do, B2B in Boston, you two need to be hired. That's the bottom line. I'm putting this out to the universe. This is some other initiative I have, and I hope he's listening, Cowboy, that he ultimately has investors and everything in Boston. I guess I'm announcing this now. But ultimately, if I could create a podcast business to business agency in Boston, that would be pretty cool. but I just bringing that out because if I had $1 million right now in revenue, I'd hire both of you. That's the bottom line, because bringing you people in so I can focus on what I'm best at
Right.
is the way you need to do things. So last question for you, Sarah, and I'm going to jump to Scott to finish up. But Scott, I know you love this content for this podcast.
Oh, I do.
My question for you, Sarah, at the end of the day, what if it's cash flow as the accountant? Because that's sometimes you shift that way because you invest your own money, which I've invested my own money in scaling a team in the last year. And I've done it before, invested in tutors and just whatever. And why cash flow is so important. How where you're driven on sales, the market, everything. How important is to try to have someone like you on board to really show all that so you can get investment and investing into that business, because ultimately at the end of the day, cash flow can be the thing that stops you from growing.
So to clarify your question, you're saying, what if the problem is cash flow?
Cash flow.
How would a COO partner
Yeah.
support that? Well, so cash flow really, I mean, that's sales and marketing. And there are other fractional roles that can support that. There are other coaches and partners that can help. Is it your messaging? Is it your positioning? Is it your ICP? Like all of these things that I'm learning now as a CEO and entrepreneur that I need to be focused on, that were not my primary focus as the COO. So
Okay. No, so I'm more talking about when you down the line, I know a role like you have is very important if you're going with investors. Operations is
oh, yes,
so frigging big. So that's where I'm more directing the question.
gotcha. So
That I have it.
justify.
Yeah.
Yeah, to justify the investment. If you don't have an operations person on board or a partner that you're working with, then that's going to be seen as a risk, because they're investing in something that may not be sustainable, either if you're not part of it as the founder, or as you grow and scale, do you have the foundation and the systems and the accountability needed to make sure that standards are met, that best practices are followed, and that all of the things that really drive client satisfaction and employee satisfaction are in place and sustainable? Because if they're not, then either the culture dies and you start losing people and clients, or your quality of service goes down, your quality of communication goes down, and you lose clients. So everything that a COO is in tuned with and driving is what needs to be in place for an investor to say, yes, this is a risk I'm willing to take, because I see that the pieces are in place to make sure that it's functional and profitable.
Well, you can pretty much have sold me. It's just for not my agency, but another agency someone wants me to work on. Look at me just telling my business, but it doesn't matter who's going to take my position. They're not. No one can be the presenter, the media giant. So they can't duplicate me. Scott, they can't make me 6'10", right? There's no one can be 6'10" that can talk on the mic like me, right?
No, nobody else, Neil, just you.
No one else. Exactly. All right. So Scott, finish it up. But I mean, I think we got such great content from Sarah to show what a marketing agency needs to do when it comes to operations and how she can help people. Right, Scott?
Oh, absolutely. And Sarah, it's been a spectacular discussion. Thank you for coming on. We're right at the very end of our time. So tell everybody how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Sarah Still, Vivid Impact Partners, or you can email me at sarah@vividimpactpartners.com.
All right. That was a special simulcast of Neil